Welcome to Standing Firm, a Come Follow Me podcast. Here are your hosts, Jordan and Louis Onga. Welcome, everybody, to Standing Firm, a Come Follow Me podcast. My name is Louis, here in our studio, as always, with my brother and my co-host, Jordan. And Jordan, what's up, man?
Not too much. The same old, just trying to endure this weather, waiting on rain.
Yeah.
How about you, man?
Oh, my goodness. It's been kind of an emotional week, but all good stuff, right? I don't want anyone worrying about me. There's nothing bad whatsoever. It's just been one of those weeks. So if the tear jar has some extra contributions this week, you'll understand why.
Tear jar is very vulnerable today.
Yeah,
huh?
exactly.
Let's get after it.
So this week we finish our study of the book of Alma, unbelievably.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah, covering chapters 53 through 63. And these chapters have a little bit of everything, right? War, strategy, diplomacy, political disagreements, and on the spiritual side, enormous faith. The thing I love about these chapters too is you can see and feel that the hand of the Lord fulfilling his promise regarding the house of Israel, scattering Israel across the world. And you just get the sense as you read these chapters that all of the Lord's promises about gathering the house of Israel in these latter days are coming true and will come true.
Right.
But all of it is started off with the enormous faith of the people of Ammon, who by faith, integrity, and really just flat out obedience allowed their stripling sons to become warriors, to take up arms in defense of the Nephites. One of the things I really enjoyed in this chapter 53, starting us off, is how the record reminds all of us of the difference between our own instinct versus what we know we should do. Early in this chapter, the people of Ammon, who, if you might remember, buried their weapons of war in what they called weapons of rebellion, and promised by covenant to never take up arms again. However, when an imminent threat arises, some of them cast aside their oath and they prepare for battle until Helaman comes along and says, basically, I beg of you, do not break your oath. Have faith in the Lord that he'll deliver us if we stay faithful. Now, if you're like me, every 6 months during General Conference, you have a moment or several moments when you are listening to a message from a prophet of God and you think, I really needed that talk.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes our instinct and our selfishness take over and we want to walk back on a particular covenant. As covenant men and women, we need to heed the pleadings of prophets that call us back, that call us to remembrance of these promises that we've made. And that's what we see here as Helaman reminds the people of Ammon of just the catastrophic consequences of going back on their word to God. And the record states it in no uncertain terms. Quote, and Helaman feared lest by doing so they should lose their souls. So powerful. And the people of Ammon do end up staying faithful to their promise, and that sets the stage for, no question, the most well-known, most celebrated armed force in this record, maybe of all time, the 2,000 stripling sons of Helaman.
Oh, yes. The 2,000 stripling warriors. They are probably, I'm going to go ahead and declare it. Other than when Christ comes, this is my tops of the tops when it comes to favorite parts of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
2,000 stripling warriors. I really love Mormon's tribute that he gives to these young, fearless warriors. Verse 20, they were all young men. They were exceedingly valiant for courage. This is not all. They were men who were entrusted at all times in whatever so thing that they were entrusted to do. Verse 21, they were men of truth and soberness, for they had been taught to keep the commandments of God and to walk uprightly before him. Louis, you mentioned last week the church putting out these great Book of Mormon videos. They really are an awesome tool to help you follow along. It's really painted a powerful picture of each character as the record continues to go forth. In this week's video, as the young warriors stood up and they stood in place for their parents to go to war, I saw the youth of the church today in them. In this video, they were full of hope. They had a desire to do good. They were strong. Their faith carried them forward. In this video, they also had really bad haircuts. Today, our youth, they're full of hope. They want to do good. They're strong. They move forward with faith, and they also have really bad haircuts.
Truer words were never spoken.
But when thinking about these 2000 stripling warriors, man, this comparison with them and the youth today is much more common to hear than my comparison last week with Captain Moroni and Chuck Daly. But with these stripling warriors, in that moment of preparation for battle and in that moment of need, there they stood. They were the best option that the Lord had at that moment. Today, what the youth face, with what they struggle with, and what they stand up against, they are the best option that the Lord has for the task right now. As parents, it's very easy to see them for their faults, maybe laziness and frustration at times, but just as these warriors were created and tinkered with for an ageless amount of time by the greatest creator of this universe, to take on the large task that was asked of them back then, I know that our youth were created for this day. Yes, I'm talking about the very youth that roll their eyes and say, "Calm down, bro."
Those ones?
Yeah. Crazy enough, it is them. They were created by the most creative mind ever, and they were saved for this time because they are the best that he has right now. If we look at them that way consistently, they just might start to look at themselves that way as well. It's in their DNA. It's in their spiritual makeup. They might just need to be looked upon in that light more consistently. A little bit more praise, a little bit more support. Uplifted by these little victories, like taking the trash out, making their beds. If the scriptures are true, then let us put to test that by small and simple things are great things brought to pass. I know that these youth today are the very best that the Lord has, and they might just need a reminder of that often. And that really stood out to me this week.
That's powerful and so true. Jordan, you mentioned the youth of the church, and it really is a miracle. The miraculous ways that they feel the desire and that pull within them to carry on the legacy of the ones who came before them. We see it all the time, and they express it in their own special way, but they're truly remarkable people. One symbolic lesson in this chapter has to do with our temple and family history work and the importance of making that a generational labor. In this chapter, the stripling sons of the people of Ammon took over where their parents couldn't. And there's a great parallel there to temple and family history work. When I was a youth, I had two amazing examples in my life. People that showed me the joy of family history work and temple covenants and ordinances. Those were our grandmother on mom's side, Nana June, and our Auntie Ruby Sikahema. They both had a resonant and abiding love for the temple and for family history work. A photo that I have that I treasure is of me with Nana June and with Auntie Ruby at the Mesa Temple on a day when I participated in baptisms for many of the male names that they had painstakingly prepared for ordinance. At that time, I wasn't mature enough to really realize the enormity of that moment, but I've reflected with fondness on that day over the years. Family history and temple ordinances for those in our family who have passed on has been a passion of mine over the years because of the lessons instilled in me by those two beautiful and faithful women. And there's so much left to do, but it has been a joy for Brittany and I to participate in performing ordinances for our family with our son Xander and our daughter Zaylee. And next year, our daughter Lily will be old enough to go to the temple, and I know she's looking forward to that as well. Much like the people of Ammon, we will need our sons and daughters to one day pick up where we left off. And we need to prepare those sons and daughters now to have the passion and the courage and the worthiness and the desire to step up and take over. And I know that the Lord will bless those efforts in miraculous fashion, just as he blessed the stripling sons of Helaman and the Ammonites.
Lou, you bring up Nana and Auntie Ruby, and go ahead and throw $10 in the tier for me. Just thinking about both of those women, they are a textbook definition of a powerful example of a daughter of God.
Yep.
And they defended their turf as mothers.
They did.
that is a great lead to my next topic. If we wanted to jump to chapter 56, you can almost see the tender tears of Helaman when he is reporting to Captain Moroni about the 2,000 stripling warriors. If they had a tear jar back in the day, trust me, that would be mighty full.
Yeah.
But speaking about these great warriors, Helaman says that they had never fought ever, but they did not fear this fight. They didn't fear because their mothers taught them to not doubt God, that God would deliver. I think that when I think about this part in the Book of Mormon, I always seem to remember verse 48, that saying, "We do not doubt, our mothers knew it." And that was the mother's faith that got them through it. But paired with the verse before that, verse 47, I learned more in depth that it was the mother's teachings that taught these young warriors to never doubt God. The mothers had faith and they never doubted their faith. And the boys relied on that until they could rely on their own faith. This is a story that's told often today. How many times do we see our youth relying on the testimony and the faith of a parent? Right now, they may not know, and that's fine. But do they know that you know? It is so important to have your child listen to your testimonies, because they might need to rely on them until they can rely on their own. Time for some questions and some lengthy stares in the mirror. Is your testimony being felt in your home? Have you stood in a sacrament, fast, and testimony meeting lately and bore your testimony of Jesus Christ, how he's your personal savior? Once I was a teen and I thought I was really cool. All I cared about was music, girls, and sports. Teens need to see and rely on others. Mothers have a heavenly ability to carry their children. They physically are capable of doing it for 9 months, and then for a lifetime after, they carry them emotionally and spiritually. This tribute to mothers stands as one of the most profound teachings the Book of Mormon has. We were spoiled by having the example of our mother growing up. As a woman that had church clothes ready for a family of 5 kids each week, knowing that we may or may not be attending church that Sunday. Faith of a mother. My mother-in-law protects her calling as a mother fiercely and is the direct reason for the strength and drive that my children's mother has today. The power of a woman is flexed here in this chapter, and I hope that mothers, especially ones that may feel stuck, unseen, frustrated, or worried, take comfort in this. May I offer the comforting words of a latter-day apostle. Quote, "You are doing better than you think you are. You are doing God's work and you're doing it wonderfully well. He is blessing you and he will continue to bless you, especially when your days and your nights may be most challenging. Like the woman who meekly, perhaps even with hesitation and some embarrassment, fought her way through the crowd to touch the hem of the Master's garment, so Christ will say to the woman who worry and wonder and weep over their duties and the weight of being a mother, 'Daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole, and it will make your children whole as well.'" Close quote from the great Jeffrey R. Holland. Absolutely love that this week, and it's truly one of my favorite teachings of the Book of Mormon, and what a wonderful tribute to mothers and to women. Louis, staying in this same chapter, in chapter 56, if we jump down to verse 56, a quick note that stood out to me this week. Helaman is still recounting the miracle that takes place of the 2,000 stripping warriors. In verse 55, we learn that after the Lamanites had surrendered themselves, immediately Helaman went around with a great effort to count his young sons, fearing that he had lost one. In verse 56, to his utter surprise, not one soul fell. Not one of them fell. I love this, but this week, I love the actions of Helaman here. After a hard battle his immediate thought was if any of those young men were lost. This had to have been in the back of his mind during battle, hearing the roars of war, the clanging of swords. For such a long period of time, he never stopped thinking about losing one of his. In our wards or in our congregations, in our communities, as we are in the battle of our own personal lives, are we consistently thinking about the ones that may be lost? Are we rushing constantly to count those who are not there? Urgency is something that stood out to me this week, man. That it is something that we can pray for and get help with. To have urgency, to always count or always see who is not there. Luckily here, Helaman got to experience the relief of knowing they were all safe, but that's not always the case for us. The Lord needs us to be constantly aware, to count, to find, to save the 1, 2, 3, 100th soul. I hope and pray, and I add myself in this, that the Lord will bless our minds and our hearts to always be aware of who is not there. And if someone's not there, may we take after Helaman and rush to find them.
The symbolism in that is just awesome to think about. And it's been said that Helaman is a type or a symbol for the Savior in this particular story. Savior never stops in his relentless pursuit of finding each and every one of us and making sure that we're just okay. Following some of the storyline of these chapters, in chapter 59, we're given a glimpse into some of the strategy of this great war. As Captain Moroni, who had struggled on the battlefronts in the eastern part of the land for several years, losing 6 major cities mentioned in the record. After successfully taking back 2 of the cities, Gid and Mulek, he begins to work on a plan to recapture all of the other cities at once. Unfortunately for Moroni, just as his plan starts to come together, the Lamanites attack Nephihah, and it was Moroni's own miscalculation of the defense of that city that allowed it to be ransacked. Suddenly into Moroni's camp came a cascade of people who had survived the horrors of Nephihah. Verse 11, quote, "And now when Moroni saw that the city of Nephihah was lost, he was exceedingly sorrowful and began to doubt, because of the wickedness of the people, whether they should not fall into the hands of their brethren." As great as Moroni was, he also faced moments of doubt and weakness in the face of mounting troubles and tribulations. Moroni even displays a common defense tactic that all of us have employed from time to time, blaming everyone else for bad things that happen. Moroni writes a scathing letter to Pehorin, the chief judge in Zarahemla, basically saying, "Shame on you for abandoning us and not supporting us with what we need. I'm out here fighting this battle and you're sitting pretty in the capital city, not lifting a finger to help." Pehorin responds with a letter saying, "Moroni, I know you're upset with me, but you don't know what you don't know. And what you don't know is that Zarahemla is under siege by a group of Nephites, and they have appointed a king. And as much as you need help, I need it too." A lot of times our impulse is to assume the worst in people. But just like Moroni and Pehorin, this story teaches us that you never know what someone else is going through. When someone attacks you and they are out of line or they don't have all the information, the best thing we can do is to respond as Pehorin did and just calmly explain yourself, especially if your cause is justified. Pehorin's humble admission and his pleadings for Moroni's help is what eventually ends the war, as Moroni marches on Zarahemla with the title of liberty, a makeshift army of free men, and retakes the city. And with Pehorin's help, they retake Nephihah and drive the remainder of the Lamanites out of their cities, establishing peace at long last.
That is awesome stuff there, Lou. I think that's counsel that a lot of people could definitely use today. We are coming to the point on our show sheet that I know with a surety that I am going to be contributing to the tear jar big time. We are going to be jumping to the final chapter here in Alma, in chapter 63. And in this final chapter of Alma, we hear of a faithful and curious man by the name of Hagoth. In just a few short verses we learn of him, we learn a lot about our heritage here, Lou. We understand from this that Hagoth led many people to what people assume to be the islands of the Pacific, and that the Polynesian people, or what our Uncle Dottie would say, the coconut people, are his descendants. Louis, I can't help but think and feel a connection to Haygoth. This is a wonderful record and an answer that many people may have wondered how people got to different parts of the world. The Book of Mormon yet again offers the answers to simple questions like that. Earlier this week, we were discussing this man and a unique connection that we have with him. I asked Louis if he would share our family's unique story of the massive presence in our family of our great-grandfather, Iki Tupo Folivai. I love this man and his journey. As I've gotten to know him, I was impressed to name my son Rudy after him. Rudy's middle name is named after this spiritual giant, Iki Nisiasi. But I feel like our family has a connection to Haygoth, in that he may have started the Lord's work by bringing a group of people to the Pacific Islands through a curious mind and a fantastic builder's skill set. But our grandpa Iki was able to restore the teachings of the gospel to these wonderful and faithful group of people so many years later.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you for bringing this up this week. I really owe you a debt of gratitude for that. It caused me to take really a closer look at this just incredible story about our great-grandpa Iki. As this week's reading deals a lot with the Lord's promised scattering of Israel, but also his promise to gather Israel in this last dispensation, and that is where this story has so much meaning and just fits so well with this week's reading. Like you mentioned, Jordan, in Alma 63, we're introduced to Haygoth, who is no doubt a skilled shipbuilder and a voyager. I have no idea why, in a record with very limited space, that Mormon would include these verses in chapter 63 about Haygoth. But
Yeah.
one thing I know is that there's no wasted space in Mormon's divinely guided abridgment of the record. So there is a purpose for this. Wise in God for the inclusion of Haygoth, beginning in verse 5. And it came to pass that Haygoth, he being an exceedingly curious man, I love that part of it. You can just picture the Nephites sitting around. Did you see what Haygoth was doing today? Therefore he went forth and built him an exceedingly large ship on the borders of the land bountiful by the land desolation, and launched it forth into the West Sea. Moving down to verse 8, and it came to pass that they were never heard of more, and we suppose that they were drowned in the depths of the sea. And it came to pass that one other ship did also sail forth, whither she did go, we know not. Now, just like you mentioned, Jordan, it's been speculated over the last 200 years now by members of the church in Polynesia that these verses explain how the house of Israel established itself in the isles of the sea and in other places. But it goes beyond speculation. Latter-day prophets and other general authorities, many of them, have also said that certain groups of people all up and down the Pacific Ocean are descendants of Haygoth and those who journeyed with him. Whether those proclamations are matters of opinion or received by revelation, I can't say for sure. Only the Lord knows who the true descendants of Haygoth are. In the end, for now, we can only hope that this is true. I really hope it is, because this has always been a favorite part of the Book of Mormon for me because of that possibility. Now back to great-grandpa Iki. When we talk about gathering Israel from every corner of the earth, this incredible story is one of the best examples of how Heavenly Father uses people that are in tune with the spirit of revelation to accomplish his purposes in his timing. As the story goes, in March of 1907, President Thomas Court, who was president of the Samoan mission, visited the Vava'u Island group, which is one of the northernmost island groups in Tonga. President Court was there, according to his journal, to investigate the prospects of reopening missionary work in Tonga, which had been closed for more than 15 years at that point. He was also trying to purchase some horses for the mission in Samoa. Arriving in Vava'u's scenic port of refuge harbor, he met our great-grandpa Iki Tupofulivai, who was the harbor master. There was no lodging in Neafu, the capital city of Vava'u, so Iki invited President Court to stay in his home. That would be a customary thing in Tonga. Iki, the harbor master, was a well-traveled, well-educated man. He spoke several languages. He was always very well dressed. He presented himself very well. Just like you alluded to, Jordan, when Mormon mentioned Hagoth as an exceedingly curious man, the same could be said for Grandpa Iki. I'm sure most of the Tongan people would have described him as such. President Court was in Vava'u for a few weeks, and in April, when he departed for Samoa, Iki asked him if he would send missionaries back to teach English to his children. President Court said, "We can do that." And upon returning to Apia, the capital city in Samoa, he assigned elders Heber J. McKay and William O. Facer to return to Vava'u. When they arrived at the harbor, the two young missionaries found Grandpa Iki, and he arranged for them to teach in a room of a certain home in Neafu. When the elders opened the school on June 24th, 1907, and they taught children by day and adults by night. For the most part, none of the Tongans were interested in hearing the gospel message. They were only interested in learning English from the elders. Although this was incredibly frustrating for the missionaries, they trusted in the Lord, they continued to teach English, and they prayed for a breakthrough. Now, the story that's told in our family, at least the story that I've always been told, is that eventually Grandpa Iki realized that the gospel message was true, and his conversion helped open the floodgates of missionary work in Tonga. But I never knew how it happened until I read the book Saints of Tonga by Fred E. Woods, Riley M. Moffat, and Brent R. Anderson. The story of how it happened is the most powerful part of all. So for those of you who are old enough to remember Paul Harvey, now I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. According to the book, in late November, about 6 months after the elders arrived, one of Grandpa Iki's young children was stricken with whooping cough. If you don't know much about whooping cough, in 2024, it is a somewhat serious disease for infants and children. But in 1907, in Tonga, this was a grave condition. Grandpa Iki, in faith, approached the elders and asked them to give his child a priesthood blessing. He had been told previously that the missionaries held this priesthood, the power of God. The young elders, McKay and Facer, who had prayed mightily for an opportunity, administered the blessing by the laying on of hands. When the blessing was finished, the child was healed. Word of the blessing and the miracle spread through the villages like wildfire. This excerpt from the book, Saints of Tonga, quote, "This healing was the impetus for many people asking the elders for priesthood blessings. In fact, so many that Elder McKay wrote President Court asking if there were any precautions needed with so many requests for the elders to heal their children," unquote. In January of 1908, Great-Grandpa Iki Tupou was baptized a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Dozens of baptisms followed, and a branch was organized. By July 1909, a church building was purchased and the first Tongan area conference was held. Today, more than 65% of Tongans around the world are members of the church. In Tonga, a tiny island nation, there are 21 stakes, 140 wards, 35 branches, 1 mission, and 1 temple. In the April 2019 General Conference, President Nelson announced the Neafu Vava'u Tonga Temple, the beloved home island of Great-Grandpa Iki. The temple will be completed in late 2025. By small and simple things are great things brought to pass. That's all the time that we have today for our show. In the tier jar today is $50. That brings our total for the year to $415. $415 in the tier jar. Donating all the money to Church Humanitarian Aid at the end of the year. Thank you so much for joining us for today's show. We're so grateful to everybody that listens and to everybody who sends us messages and writes us. That's all for this week. Until next week, Tu'uma'u, stand firm. For Jordan, I'm Louie. Love one another. We'll be back in a week. Standing Firm, a Come Follow Me podcast, is a production of Sierra House Publishing, LLC. The show, or any opinions expressed therein, are not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For a transcript of today's show, please visit our website at standingfirmpodcast.com.